I want to attempt to shoehorn an audience question in with one that was on our agenda here. So keep talking about customizing and customized single-use systems. And earlier when we were speaking, we talked about how there seems to be this idea out there that you can't use the same single-use system for different modalities and processes. And you seem to indicate that that's a misconception. And I'm curious why you think this misconception persists, that the single-use systems need to be redesigned for each modality. And the audience question I want to shoehorn in there is from Mitchell, who's curious about what part of the process is most applicable to start initiating the standardization. Would it be volume-based, volume-specific, or is it where the process is less resistant to customization? I'm not sure if those two questions merge well together, but I'm going to present those to you. And Frank, you're smiling. I wonder if you have a response to that.
I do. I think I would say a unit ops approach. I'm specifically thinking about chromatography, and that has to do with the fact that there are maybe two suppliers for equipment that everybody utilizes for chromatography, especially in the single use, and it's probably only one. But so there's a tubing assembly that is standardized for you already, because it fits in that piece of equipment. And then, you design yours around that. And so, for me, that's a great relief, because that's a quote unquote, off the shelf item that relieves some of these concerns as far as supply chains. So that one takes up less space in my brain. But, that is also a very detailed tubing assembly that has, needs to be executed perfectly. But that is what I would say as far as a starting point. And I get that that's cheating a little bit since it's somewhat already done. But I think some of these unit ops, the equipment is very similar, if not the same. So I would say TFF is another a big one in my mind, especially if you're doing automated TFF, which I don't think anybody does it the old-fashioned way anymore. I seem to be the only one around here, at least, that still does that. But and so the instrument that you're going to go in, and I think there's just some hesitation, maybe with TFF specifically, that you don't want to be beholden to your supplier. So for that piece of equipment, and it would be nice to have backup suppliers and things like that. And I agree with that as well. But that's what I would say.
Thank you, Frank.
But Frank, I think what I'm reacting to on that is some of the interoperability motivations are completely out of the picture here, right? So if I'll talk about a bioreactor, that's, if you've committed to one of the big commercial suppliers of single-use bioreactors, you're pretty much married to them. You may buy their standard bag, 200-liter stirred tank with a ATF connection or whatever, but it's going to come from whatever big supplier you've decided to. So that's where I think we're kind of into a conflict here. We've got standardization, but we don't have interoperability. Because
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So the supplier themselves is selling a standard, meaning a one SKU to many customers relationship, but it's not the standardization that brought us to this conversation. But it does sort of solve some of the supply chain issues, because the one-to-many relationship is very meaningful for the suppliers.
Oh, that was a great point. I like that. We have standardization, but we don't have the interoperability. From where you guys sit, what are the logical next steps across the industry? Is it more on the vendors to put their differences aside, quite literally, and work together to reach harmonization, or do you think it's from the top down, from regulators? Where do we sit now in terms of maturing single use to the point of harmony that we speak of? It's hypothetical. Harmonization. While you guys think of that, I'd like to also implore the audience to respond to our poll question that's up there right now. Sorry. Go ahead, Paul.
The old joke is, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help. Those words don't go together. So you regulate yourself to avoid being regulated, because you want to be in control of your own destiny. From my perspective, I think the supply base, we're far enough along now, 2 or 3 decades into single use, that there's a state of maturity within the supply base with regard to sort of trying not to be competitive on things that actually result in anti-competitive situation. And the BPSA's success, I think, Mark, you would agree that you've been involved long enough to have seen this shift. I mean, I was there in the early days, and it was very much a protectionism. I should be careful what I say, but we all showed up because we were afraid the BPSA was going to do something that that was going to mess us up as suppliers. Well, now we've sort of gotten past that, and now it's about solving challenges that are better solved together than competing on them, because a rising tide raises all boats, as Rick Sullivan used to say.
Yeah, I like that one. And even though maybe we haven't, to one of the audience questions, that we haven't as an industry or as a community standardized and harmonized, if you look at the websites of any of the single-use suppliers who I work with, they all have very nice catalogs of standards, even with some configuration capabilities kind of built in, like standard customization options, I guess you might call it. I think of it like the pizza ordering menu. You can add whatever toppings you like, but it still looks like a pizza. Something like that. And so I think rather than getting too upset about the fact that maybe supplier A and supplier B have some 2D bag collections that don't exactly match each other, we should maybe focus more on what's the same and say, yeah, these bag films for this low risk application, I'm going to judge equivalent. There's the same connectors that I like to use or often use, so they'll fit into my process, and then go again and do that little bit extra qualification burden that I talked about to get them both qualified in your system. So that then you can buy from either of those standard collections. I see a lot of progress there. Sometimes the problem with a discussion like this is it's like, this is a big problem and we need to fix it. And there still are plenty of ways we could improve in the industry, but there's been a tremendous increase both in the availability of these supplier created standards or stand off the rack, if you will, off the shelf options. But I think also an increase in awareness that they even exist and that people are willing to try them. When I was new, 2009, 2010, I know at least 1 or 2 of the suppliers had standard offerings, probably more did, but I was barely aware of it. And in my own defense, the salespeople from those companies were not really interested in pushing those standards. I don't know why. I think because they were priding themselves on customer focus and customization, whatever you want. I used to joke that the napkin at the Lunch and Learn would have the design drawn on it, and something else would come into the company in plastic 2 weeks later. And there were companies that were very, very good at that. Don't get me wrong, but it led to this profusion and confusion of designs. So I'm happy to see the standards that do exist. There was a question in the chat about how, when do you decide to use the company standard, your own standard, a supplier standard, or go custom. I've always coached people to go to the supplier standard first because they probably like to make that, like Paul was saying, it's easier for them. Maybe they have better data on it. Then go to your own standard, and then only after that, go to something brand new, sketching on the Lunch and Learn napkin.
Thank you, guys.
I've seen I've seen a
Go ahead, Mark.
growth in kind of a hybrid approach as well. So, Paul was talking about you're married to that piece of equipment and therefore that supplier. And then the customization coming out. So subs being the one that is on the top of my head, the guts of it are the same because it has to interact with the equipment, but the outlets, inlets, and probes can be any number of things. But
Mhm.
there's been a lot of effort, I think, to not require the whole drawing new AutoCAD design and just kind of plug and play with little bits and pieces there that can really expedite and have the best of both worlds.